I'm turning this over to Beth Mulcahy. She's been instructing for the city of Scottsdale for a long time, probably close to 20 years, and she always gets great reviews. So, ladies and gentlemen, Beth Mulcahy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I'm with the Mulcahy Law Firm, and I'm your presenter today. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I wish it was in person, and I wish we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, but I miss seeing all of you that usually attend our classes in person, and I just would like to give a very big shout out to Bruce and Jamie from the city of Scottsdale for putting together these classes in such a quick fashion while the pandemic is going on. So big shout out to them. Well, first I wanted to start out by saying that one of the best parts of teaching these classes, and I have been teaching them for the past 20 years, it's been my pleasure to provide education to board members, homeowners, managers for many, many years, and I'm pleased to be here today too. But one of the best parts of these classes, of course, is that I get to see you, and I get to see, you know, if you're excited about a topic or if you have a lot of questions. There's a lot of hands raising. And so that's one of the harder parts about teaching a class in this platform and Zoom. But we're going to do our best today to try to get feedback from you throughout the presentation and to be available to answer questions. And we're going to be talking more about that as we go forward. One of the great things is that we have over 100 attendees here today for this Zoom call. And so one of the things that I like to do, because I want to connect with you, I want to see you, is I would absolutely love if you would just give me a little like wave or a thumbs up or something and let me know that you're there. And while you do that, I'm going to wave back. Hi, everybody. Miss seeing you in person. Wish I could be there to give you a hug. And great to see everybody. Great to see everybody, all the faces and the enthusiastic attitudes that I'm seeing here today. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have an interactive session. So if you can see the screen right now, throughout my presentation, I want to hear from you. And so we're going to be doing what we call an informal poll. And so one of the things I love doing is starting out, finding out who's in my audience. So what I'd like you to do is look at the screen right now, and I'd like you to answer this question. So the first question is, let me know what your current role is in an association. Now, are you a board member? Are you a community manager? Are you an owner who's not a board member? You know, these are the different options. If you wouldn't mind just responding to the poll, just so I know that you know how to do the poll, because we're going to have a number of these throughout the class. And if you wouldn't mind responding, and then we'll kind of give the percentages of the poll right on the screen right away so that everybody can see who's in the audience today. So we have 74%, 49 attendees who are board members, 3% are community managers, and we have 14% who are owners who are not a board member, and then 9% who are other. So welcome to everybody. Looks like we have a large number of board members here today. Usually our class is kind of, you know, 60-40 board members and then owners who are not board members. So welcome to all of you for being here today. I hope you'll continue to participate in the polls because it's a way for me to communicate with you. Well, first, let me just introduce myself for those of you who haven't met me previously. My name is Beth Mulcahy, and I am the senior attorney and managing partner of the Mulcahy Law Firm in Phoenix, Arizona. And I have been representing associations, planned communities, and condominiums for the past 23 years. It's gone by really, really fast, and it's honestly not even a job for me. I love it so much. I love coming to work every day. I love solving problems with associations and helping boards make their communities better and turning around disgruntled owners and getting dysfunctional associations working in a more functional manner. In addition to my legal practice of representing over 1,000 associations, I also have served for over a decade as a board member in my association. And that has been a little bit challenging at times, but also a lot of fun to see progress being made in our community. I've also been an owner in an association for, 25 years. And there were some years in there where I was a disgruntled owner. So I think I bring a really unique perspective to these classes because I've been there, right? I have been in my role as an attorney. I've seen many, many problems and issues and solved many problems, but I've also been a board member. And I got to tell you, probably one of the worst years of my life was when I was the president of my association. It was horrible, I'll be honest with you. It was just a lot of pressure, and all I got was complaints. And so I understand. I've been on a board too, and I know what it's like. I'm still on my board. I'm up for re-election in December, and I've been thinking, do I still want to stay on the board? And of course, my husband just said to me, you know, you have to stay on the board. We have so many things that they need to do. And so I probably will stay on for another 3-year term if I get elected. Okay, so let's start out with another poll. You know, I want to hear from you as we go. So we've been in a pandemic now for 7 months. It's been tough for everybody, especially board members, association owners, management companies. And so we're doing a little poll, and we're curious, what is the best silver lining from the pandemic for your association or your management company? So think about, for your association, what good has come from the pandemic that, you know, maybe wouldn't have occurred if there hadn't been the pandemic? The best one. Oh, I like this. Actually, I was kind of leaning towards this one too. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling down through my computer screen. So you're more appreciative of personal contact and socializing now that that has been taken away from us. So 41% of you feel that way. 6% enjoy working from home, so do I. Virtual board meetings are effective for my association. This makes me so happy to see this 23%. So great, that's number 2. Our board meetings are shorter, 8%. We're going to give you some tips on how to make them shorter today too. And your quality of life is better, which is 11%. And then you've also enjoyed engaging in virtual education, reading, listening to podcasts. That's 12%. Okay, awesome. That is just a great summary for us too, to help us provide better education for you in the future, kind of to get a read on where people are through that poll. Okay, so we're going to be talking about 3 subjects today. We're going to talk about, we're doing a boot camp here today, which is awesome. So at certain points, I may make you exercise a little bit, exercise your brain in terms of how to, you know, be a good board member and what are the responsibilities of a board member is the first subject that we're going to be talking about. And then we're going to be talking about board meetings, how to have a successful board meeting in compliance with Arizona law. And we're going to talk about, of course, the hot topic right now, virtual board meetings. And then we are going to finish up with how to collect assessments. You know, in the pandemic, there is a very large possibility that in the first or second quarter of 2021, we're going to see an increase in the number of owners who aren't paying their assessments. So let's just do a quick little 411 at the end on what are some tips that we can give to board members to prepare for that and to know what your legal options are if owners aren't paying. And we'll also give you kind of some direct information from trends that we're seeing in our firm right now about owners paying assessments, trustee sales, bankruptcies. I'll be able to provide some valuable information for you on that too. Okay, so let's start out with our first subject, which is board member roles and responsibilities. Just as a starting point, the 3 subjects that I'm going to be talking about today, we have like a deep dive cheat sheet for each of these subjects, and you can either find those on our webpage for our firm at mulcahylawfirm.com, or you have probably already been provided a copy of them from the city of Scottsdale prior to the presentation today. And so, of course, you can go to our website, look under our cheat sheets tab on our homepage for these 3 cheat sheets that we're going to be talking about today. Or you can also always contact our firm, and we'd be happy to provide you a link to a cheat sheet for any of these topics. And we actually have 61 cheat sheets now, which is a lot of different topics to help associations be more effective and do things in compliance with Arizona law. Okay, so you've been elected to the board. What now, right? That's a question that I get often when people get elected to the board, like, how serious are my responsibilities? Like, this is just like a volunteer gig for me, right? Like, do I really have to know all these laws, and do I really have to read these long CC&Rs and bylaws and rules? Well, yes, you do. And so what I'd like to do today is just give you the most important things you need to know in a short period of time. If you're serving on your board, or if you've just been elected to your board, or if you're thinking about running for your board, or if you're a homeowner that's here today and you're like, hey, my board isn't following the law, like I need to have backup here to show them that, hey, you're supposed to be doing this. I'm going to give you just kind of a quick 411 on these are the most important things you need to be thinking about if you're a board member. And so as you can see, the PowerPoint for today is on the screen, and kind of the main thing you need to remember that when you're elected to your board, owners and association members are looking to their board of directors to provide caring leadership and service that makes living in their community desirable. I mean, that's your job being on the board. So you have to be a leader. You're providing, service. You're a volunteer. But you also have to be a caring individual. Some of the boards that I find are the not successful have, a different mentality. Like, we're all in this together. Like, this is our home. And we want our association to be successful. We want people to get along. We want it to be maintained. And part of that is we have to be caring and listen to people and hear opposing viewpoints. And so that's a really important point to make right up front. And the board of directors is overseeing what might be one of the largest assets an association member has, their home. And so we need to run this like a business, just like, even though we're a nonprofit corporation, we got to run this just like other large businesses do, like Walmart or the McDonald's Corporation or, any other large for-profit corporation. We have to follow the laws, and we have to treat this like a professional business. So the first thing is just remember you need to follow the law. There are a number of different laws that you need to know about. We're going to do an overview of them and get you familiar with what you don't know or what you do know. There are a number of Arizona laws, and there are also some federal laws that as a board member you are required to follow and know about. Also, you need to conduct yourself in a professional and business-like manner when you're serving on your board. And this means that, I can just say from firsthand experience, there have been some times where I have left my board meeting, especially when I was president, where I just felt like I wanted to cry. It was so negative, and it was so many people, they never came to us and said, thank you for the 100 hours figuring out that huge problem. No. There's the flowers at the front entrance of our community look horrible. And what are you going to do about it, right? And so even when you get negative feedback, you have to find a way to turn it into a positive and thank people for letting you know. And we're aware of it and we're working on it. We really appreciate you coming here tonight to tell us it. And I think as a board member, you have to have a thick skin, right? If you want to, it's almost like swimming with the sharks, right? If you want to be in the water making decisions about your community and improving your community and moving your community forward in a positive direction, it's not all candy and roses, and you need to know that. Part of the job is taking criticism, part of the job is making mistakes, and part of the job, frankly, is dealing with difficult people. And so as you're a board member, as you're serving on the board, and if you're an owner that is dealing with the board has a responsibility to be professional, to be businesslike, to be kind, to be patient, right? And that's just part of the job. So it's important that we say that up front. So follow the law, be professional. And we're going to move to the next slide now. And the next slide is going to be talking about just the general responsibilities of the board. So these are things that I find that boards need a refresher on. So when I'm doing a boot camp for a board, I like to come in and mention many of these different things because sometimes boards either aren't aware of these responsibilities or they have never served on a board before. Let's face it, a lot of you have spent your life doing other things. You didn't spend your whole life preparing to be a volunteer HOA board member or a volunteer condo board member. So what I try to do with this list is to come up with a really good summary of these are the things that you need to know, right? So the first one is if you're elected to your board, you have to participate, right? And that means attending board meetings, that means arriving on time to the board meetings, being knowledgeable, researching board issues, and being ready to discuss and vote on issues at the regular board meetings. So, you know, if you're elected to the board, and we get this question actually kind of often, is, you know, we have a board member on our board who said they wanted to be on the board, they ran for the board, but then when they were elected, they never came to meetings. They never responded on things, or they showed up at meetings and they were totally ill-prepared to participate. And so if you are elected to the board, you do have a responsibility for the term that you're on the board to, you know, show up, be ready to make decisions, be informed. Another thing that you're required to do is to read, understand, and be in compliance with the governing documents for your association. And the governing documents are the CC&Rs, the bylaws, the articles of incorporation, the rules and regulations, the design guidelines if you have any, architectural guidelines if you have any. And I'm not saying that you have to spend, you know, an hour on each document. No. What I'm saying is once a year, just do a quick spin through them. And by quick spin, I mean spend 15 minutes max. Finger through them. Get the general lay of the land on the documents. And just kind of know how they're all set up, okay? And that will help you that if you have a problem in the future and you need to know, well, where is the insurance provision? Well, you go back and look at the CC&Rs and there'll be an insurance provision there. Is there something in there on, you know, sheds that might be in the use restrictions in your CC&Rs? Or how many board members can we have? That's going to be in the bylaws. So just by fingering through them for 15 minutes, that's enough. That should just give you the lay of the land on it. The next one is probably arguably the most important thing I'm going to say today. So everybody wake up, make sure that you're not typing an email to somebody else while you're listening to this Zoom. This is important, okay? So I need everybody to really be thinking this is probably one of the most important things you're going to hear today. You have a fiduciary duty to the association and the members when you're elected to the board. And, you know, what does that mean? You know, the fiduciary duty is set up under Arizona law and the Nonprofit Corporation Act. And basically what it means is you have a duty of care, a duty of confidentiality, and you have a duty to avoid conflicts of interest. And so a duty of care means you have to take care when you're doing this job, right? You have to think about problems that come before you and come up with solutions and do research, get 3 bids, rely on your trusted advisors. Maybe it's your attorney, your management company, your reserve specialist, and an insurance specialist. It's taking care in what you do, right? And when you're serving on your board. The duty of confidentiality, this is kind of a big one for some associations. When you get elected to your board, let's face it, you hear the juicy scoop on everything. And that's something that sometimes you're like, oh, wish I hadn't heard that, right? But when you serve on your board, you are privy to confidential information. And it's important that anything that you hear in executive session, that remains confidential. And you shouldn't be discussing it with your walking group, with your spouse, with your friends. Anything in executive session is confidential, okay? And then the last one is a duty to avoid conflicts of interest. And that means that you can't profit from your time on the board, and your family can't profit from your time on the board. So you shouldn't be hiring a relative to do the landscaping. You should be, just be really mindful of in no way engaging in what they call self-dealing, where you are benefiting or a member of your family is benefiting from your service as a volunteer on the board. So fiduciary duty, act with care, keep things confidential, avoid conflicts of interest. That's really important for your time on the board. Placing the interests of the association above your own interests. I mean, I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but when you're making decisions regarding the association, it's important that you are making decisions that are what's best for the community, what's best for the association, not what's best for me individually. Overseeing and treating the association's services and facilities as a business. This is also really important. A very common thing that we see is that board members sometimes forget that they're running a business, right? And that they, need to treat this like a business. So if you are hiring contractors, they should be licensed and bonded. If you're bidding out a large capital improvement project of, a couple $100,000, you should be getting at least 2 bids, preferably 3 bids. So be careful on that, because we see a lot of times where the board thinks, oh, well, it's okay, we can have the handyman go up and fix the roof. And frankly, we've seen cases as legal counsel for associations where the handyman isn't licensed, isn't bonded, and when he's fixing the roof, he falls off the roof. And then the next thing you know, we're being sued. And, he claims he's the, employee of the association, and he's not really an independent contractor. And now we're, having to pay for this person's medical bills potentially. So it's really important that we treat things like a business in our time, that we're on the board. Overseeing the management company. So you got to keep your eye on your management company. If you have a management company for your association, you need to be checking up to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. The treasurer especially needs to keep a close eye on the financials to make sure that everything is being handled in a professional manner, and that there is no fraud or embezzlement. I mean, it's very rare that we see it, but we have seen it. Where there's been issues in Arizona, there's been cases, of course, on this, and newspaper articles on it. So you have to keep an eye on the management company. And it's not just the president and the treasurer, of course, have probably the hyper scrutiny that they have to give the management company, but also the other board members. They should be also making sure that the management company is living up to their responsibilities under the contract. You need to have regular board meetings, an annual meeting every year, pursuant to the Arizona Open Meeting Law. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about how to run a board meeting in compliance with the Arizona Open Meeting Law. But one thing that I'm not going to cover in that part of the session that I want to make sure I make a point on today is that you are required under the Condominium Act and the Planned Communities Act to have an annual meeting every year. And so it's 2020, it's October 6th. If you haven't had your annual meeting yet this year, likely because of the pandemic, you are required to have an annual meeting. So you should be thinking very quickly about how can we quickly get an annual meeting put together for our association. And if you have questions on that, our firm is happy to help with giving you suggestions on how many associations have successfully had quick, fast annual meetings during the pandemic. And a lot of them are using the same platform, Zoom. Another thing that's important is you have to follow and enforce your association's documents. And so if your documents say no sheds, you really shouldn't be approving sheds in your community is a great example. And so these are all really important things. Be fair with people. You can't pursue one owner for one thing and then say, oh, we're not going to pursue it on the other owner. And you have to be fair and equitable on assessment collections. So all these things are important. Last thing on this slide before we go to the next slide is we have to give reasonable notice of CC&R violations with an opportunity to be heard before we fine owners. So if you have owners who are not complying with your documents, there's a process under Arizona law that you need to follow. You can't just bang right out of the gate, give them a fine, right? First letter, here's your $150 fine for parking your RV in the association all weekend when our documents say you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to set it up and consistent with Arizona law. So how it works is you have to first set it up with, provide them with notice of the violation. It has to be a violation of the CC&Rs, the bylaws, or the rules of the association. Then you have to give them an opportunity to be heard in that letter, and that can be in person. They can come to a board meeting, or most of the meetings right now, of course, are virtual, or you can allow them to send you an email with their position. And then after you hear their position, you can levy the fine. So set up the fines with notice of the violation, opportunity to be heard, And then after you review their response, then you can send the final letter out regarding whether or not you're going to find them. Okay, let's keep talking a little bit about what are some other general responsibilities for the board. And so we're going to go to this slide, which is general responsibilities, complying with the owner's request to inspect and review the association's documents. So a lot of times owners get frustrated because they want to see documents and the board, for whatever reason, doesn't provide the documents to the owners. And so what happens if that is the case is that these owners become frustrated. They think that the association is hiding something and that they don't want to provide information to them. And sometimes what's happening is that the board just doesn't realize that the law in Arizona says you have to provide basically almost all the records of the association to owners. There's very few things that owners can't have. Some, typical examples would be like advice from the attorney. Like if I write an opinion letter for a client, unless the board says it's okay to provide that to you, the association can withhold that from you, right? Or if we're involved in litigation, anything pertaining to pending litigation, you're not going to be able to review for obvious reasons because, we are trying to, litigate a matter. We can't have our strategy getting out to the community. Also contracts, the amount that we're paying contractors. If we have a contract with a vendor, that amount can be withheld, although it really doesn't make sense to withhold that because there's so many other places they can get that in documents that they are entitled to see. So what are some things that you can see? You can see the budget, you can see the financials, you can see the bank statements of the association, you can see all the minutes with the exception of the executive session minutes. I mean, really, there's just like a handful of things that you can't see. So remember, if you're serving on your board, you do have to provide records to owners. You have to give it to them within 10 business days of them requesting it in writing. We can charge the owner 10 cents per page if they want a copy. So just know that that is a charge that we can charge, but we can't charge them for our time in putting the records together. Now, just real briefly before we move on to the next few slides, I want to just mention that if you're an owner and you're making a records request that's like 100,000 pages or 1,000 pages or 100 pages, recognize you're really doing a disservice to your association. And so whenever we get a request like that from an owner, what we do is I will contact the owner and say, tell me what's going on. Usually it's a disgruntled owner and they're unhappy about something. And, maybe at the start of the call, they were asking for 1,000 pages. Usually we can whittle it down to, 10 pages because they may be thinking they want something and I can tell them exactly where they can look to get that. So if you get one of those really large records requests, that's a really good strategy. Reach out to the homeowner, talk with the homeowner, see if you can answer their questions and get them the exact document that they're looking for. And that'll save the board a lot of time and effort. Don't forget providing open communication to the membership. The associations that communicate the best, they don't need me. They don't need a lawyer because they have no problems. So keep that in mind. If your association is sending out the minutes of your association meetings and your association has a newsletter and you're communicating early and often on hot topics, guess what? You're going to have the fewest problems. So keep that in mind. The associations who communicate the best clearly have the fewest problems. Okay, don't forget you have to prepare an annual budget. Right now is budget season, right? You should be thinking about that for your association. If you haven't already prepared it, that's something that you should be doing. You should have a reserve study completed and adequate funds to, have money in your reserve account. And we have a cheat sheet just on that topic too, if you have any questions on that. You have to have your financial records audited or reviewed yearly as stated in your governing documents in Arizona law. So don't forget that under Arizona law, your financials for your association need to either have an audit, review, or compilation done every year. And the only time that an audit is required to be done by a CPA is if it's in your bylaws where it says it has to be done by a CPA. Okay, let's switch gears and go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about, insurance what are some other general responsibilities? You know, you are required to protect the association by having required insurances in place, and make sure if you're serving on your board, please, that you have D&O insurance, which is directors and officers insurance. But also you have to have a general liability policy for your common areas in case someone trips and falls. You should have a fidelity bond in case at any point somebody steals money from your association. So all these things are different insurance things that you should be considering. And we have a cheat sheet on insurance too. That's on our website if you're interested in that. And again, it's mulcahylawfirm.com. Okay, know when to hire people to help you. So know when to hire professionals and follow their advice. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is for me as an attorney that cares about associations, cares about making communities better, when I have a board that doesn't follow my advice. You know, my job is to keep you out of the news, right? My job is to not make you the feature story on Channel 3. My job is to make sure that you don't lose a bunch of money in, you know, a lawsuit, or make a wrong turn on handling a matter with an owner. And I mean, most of our clients are, you know, top flight. They listen to our advice and they don't have any problems, which is great. We do what we call preventative legal. And what does that mean? That means we prevent problems, and that's where you want to be. You don't want hassles on your time when you're on the board. And so, you know, just make sure that you're listening to your trusted advisors. And if you're not sure if your current trusted advisors are giving you good advice, by all means, get a second opinion. You know, I mean, I have situations right now in my office where I'm telling clients, please settle this case. This is not a good case. You know, I think we need to move on this issue. And sometimes they don't listen to me. And I think down the road, 2 years down the road, they're going to realize that, hey, we spent way too much money on that. We should have listened. And so think about when you hire professionals, you know, they're giving you their professional opinion and they're there to help you. So try to listen to them. If you don't agree with them, get a second opinion. You have to file an annual report every year, and that's the next thing I want to mention. And so every nonprofit corporation in Arizona has to file an annual report with the Arizona Corporation Commission. So make sure that your association is doing that. If you're not sure if you're in good standing, you can just go to the Arizona Corporation Commission's website and type in your association's name, and it'll tell you right then and there if you're in good standing and if the annual report has been filed for this year. You have to prepare for the annual meeting. We talked about the importance of having an annual meeting, but just make sure that you're going into your annual meeting and it's professional, you're following the law in terms of the notice, and that it's your time as a board to shine. It's your time to say, these are the things that we accomplished, here are the financials, and here are some of the challenges that we dealt with this year, and here's our plan going forward. We have a plan for the future of our community, and here's what it is. Having an approachable and business-like manner, we've talked about that several times today. That's something that's worth revisiting. Just being, you know, nice and you know, not short with people at board meetings, but keeping the meeting moving along. And if somebody disagrees with you, that's okay. Just say, thanks so much for showing up and giving us your feedback on this. We appreciate that. You also have a requirement to file state and federal taxes annually for your association. And if you're a planned community, you have a responsibility to pay taxes on your common areas. They're minimal, but you do still have a responsibility. Okay, so just quick recap here. Where do we start? Going to the next slide. You know, start by learning the basics. Like I said, spend a little time reading through your documents. You know, and you know, think about your rules and regulations, and you know, think about, are documents so old that they may need to be amended? Most documents are amended about every decade, so make sure that you're thinking about doing that. And I'm going to be teaching a class for the city of Scottsdale in November on how to amend documents. And so we're going to kind of go through that step by step. I believe it's like November 9th. I got at the end of my notes here. It's on November 9th. And so I'll be back on Zoom with you. Hopefully I'll have some new Zoom tricks that I can try out for you by then. But, you know, think about, you know, are documents antiquated? Is this something that we should be doing because it hasn't been done for 20 years? And then remember that you have a requirement to follow Arizona law. And I put in this slide here And we also have it in our cheat sheet. We can go forward to the next slide, please. You know, Title 10 and Title 33, both of these are important areas where the laws are written. So Title 10 is going to be the Nonprofit Corporation Act, and then Title 33 is going to be the Condominium Act and the Planned Communities Act, and then of course we also have a bunch of federal laws. And so we have a cheat sheet just on federal laws, but the main majority of the laws that you need to know are going to be in the Condominium Act and the Planned Communities Act. Okay, so we've got a poll that we're going to do for you right now. I'm just curious, I think we skipped one of our polls. So one thing I'd like to know, just, I think we're going to skip that one, but we're going to go to the next one is, did your association conduct an annual meeting in 2020? I'm just curious because we're hearing a lot of feedback from board members that they're calling me saying, hey, we didn't have an annual meeting in 2020. Do we really have to have one? And I bet some of you had it, you know, before March, because a lot of our clients have their annual meetings in the first quarter. But I'm curious, the rest of you, did you have one even after the pandemic, maybe virtually? Okay, awesome. This makes me so happy. So 83% of you have had an annual meeting and 11% haven't. So for those of you who haven't had your annual meeting, make sure that you're thinking about doing that before the end of 2020. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about, we kind of covered the topic that was going to take the most time here today. What are the roles and responsibilities of board members? So now let's just spend a few minutes on the open meeting law. And I think from my 23 years experience in representing associations, I can say that probably the one area that boards have the most confusion on is how do we run our board meetings, and are we subject to the same open meeting law that applies to school boards and city council? So just to start out, we have a special law that pertains just to condominiums and planned communities in Arizona. And it's the open meeting law that's in the Condominium Act and the Planned Communities Act. And basically what it says is that all meetings of the board of directors for an association where there's a quorum present, and then also regularly scheduled committee meetings must be open meetings. And so what does that mean? It means that they have to be open to all members of the association, or any person who's designated by a member to attend in writing. And any person who attends the meeting, so any owner or a designated agent who's been designated by an owner to attend, they should be allowed to give an opportunity to speak, to attend, and to speak during appropriate times during the meeting. But the board can place reasonable time restrictions on when those persons speak, and they can limit the number of people speaking at a meeting if they have a really large turnout. But the one time that owners should be allowed to speak under the open meeting law is before the board takes formal action on something. And remember that if the board is going to limit the number of people speaking on a topic, that they should allow a reasonable number of persons on each side of the topic. So they can't stack it, you know, on one side if we've got opposing viewpoints, they can't stack it, so only those people are allowed to talk. Okay, let's switch to the next slide. So how do we, you know, what kind of notice do we have to give? So if owners are allowed to attend, listen, and participate, they need to be notified, right, of the meeting. And so an association has to give notice of its members, to its members of meetings of the board. And these are just regular board meetings, right? By newsletter, conspicuous posting, or any other reasonable means, 48 hours in advance of the meeting. And so your board is required to provide notice to members 48 hours in advance of a regular board meeting. And most of our boards are doing that by posting it on bulletin boards, putting it in newsletters. Maybe they have it on their website for their association. Maybe they put it out on sandwich board signs. I mean, it really just depends on what works for your association. But the key thing is you have to give notice 48 hours in advance of the meeting. And the notice, of course, has to state the date, time, purpose, and place of the meeting. And then the notice of the meeting must also state the purpose for which the meeting is called. So what our firm suggests is that you give a detailed agenda with the notice of meeting to, you know, meet this requirement of letting people know what's going to be discussed at the board meeting. We're going to talk in a minute about virtual board meetings and what type of special notice we have to give. So I'm not going to do that right now, but we are going to cover that in just a minute. Okay, so we're going to flip to the next slide. And basically, a very large question that we have is, okay, when do we go into executive session? So what is executive session? Executive session is typically just the board, no one else. And maybe it's your manager, managing agent representative, maybe your attorney, maybe you have a special guest, like an owner, who is coming to talk about an issue with the board. But mainly it's just the board. So when can you go into executive session? Well, first let me back up. Before your board goes into executive session, you have to tell the owners what subjects you're going to be discussing in the executive session. And basically you just have to give one of these 5 categories that we're going to talk about on the next few slides. And so there's a lot of confusion, so if you're having your executive session right after your board meeting, what you should do is either put on the agenda that we're going to be going in to discuss delinquencies or violations or advice from our attorney or whatever the topics are that you're going to be discussing. At that point, if you put it on the agenda, you also may want to refresh their memory at the end of the open session and say, now we're going into executive session. That's a good way to comply with that law. So what are the most common reasons to go into executive session? We're just going to kind of go through these slides really quickly because the next 3 slides it's a lot of legal language. And so the most important thing is to know is that, here are the most common topics that we go into executive session for. Advice from your attorney, number 1. Delinquencies and violations, number 2. Occasionally you'll find out personal information about an owner, and that's something that you may go into executive session for, but that's like a once a year type thing, right? So another area that you could potentially go into executive session for, and to be going to the next slide, which should be if you're talking about the job performance of or how much you're paying your vendors or employees. And then the last topic, which we really don't see that often, but we can go into a member's appeal, discussing a member's appeal, unless the member wants it discussed in the open session, which trust me, they never do. So really the main times that you're going to go into executive session are going to be to discuss legal advice, to discuss delinquencies, violations. That's going to be the main thing. Maybe if you're having a problem with a contractor, that's going to be another time that you go into executive session. Okay, last but not least, flip into the next slide. Your meetings have to be held in Arizona. I mean, I think that's kind of obvious, but even in the pandemic, the Zoom meetings, kind of throws a little bit of a wrench into that. But when we get back to meeting in person, we have to give owners an opportunity to have a meeting in Arizona when we go back to the in-person meeting. You should have an agenda available. You can have emergency board meetings where you suspend the 48 hours notice, but it has to be a true emergency. And what does that mean? It means we have to make a decision on something quickly, and we can't wait 48 hours to notice the meeting. If we flip to the next slide, we can use a speakerphone. I mean, it's kind of laughable now. The law hasn't yet caught up to the pandemic, but, as part of prior legislation, as long as both sides can hear each other, you can use a speakerphone and have somebody dial into the meeting. Of course, we've gone, we're like on speed legislation on this, right? They're going to need to pass something saying that we can have video meetings after the pandemic. And then remember, this is really important. I have some associations that don't listen on this, and they really do need to listen. If you're having what we call like a study session or a work session for your board, it's still a board meeting if a quorum of the board is there. So you have to provide the 48 hours notice, etc. And remember, be careful on the open meeting law. If you're making decisions by email, you potentially could be subjecting your association to being sued for a violation of the open meeting law. Okay, some parting thoughts on tips for video conferencing meetings or conference calls. Just our firm has a cheat sheet actually on this topic, so I believe that was provided to you today. If not, find a copy of it on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. But what are some just real important tips that we can give you on complying with the open meeting law and still having video conferencing on your meetings? Okay, Number one, we're still advising boards that they should not be meeting in person during the pandemic. It's not a good idea. There's liability for your association, and insurance likely will not cover it if somebody says that they contracted COVID, at a board meeting or whatever. So, and there's so many great platforms like this one today that we're able to exchange information. So we're suggesting that if your board or committees are meeting during this pandemic time, that you should be having virtual meetings. And that could be either using a platform like Zoom or doing a conference call. All of these work. If you're one of those boards that hasn't transitioned yet to having meetings in this format, make sure you reach out to our firm. We're here to help you. We have this great cheat sheet that you can use. We've been helping boards train them. I did a training last week for a board on, we got everybody on the board on Zoom at the same time, and we went through all the features together, and it was a really successful meeting. So reach out to your trusted advisors to help you if you haven't yet transitioned to this, or if you haven't yet had your annual meeting. Okay, a few things. The notice for a virtual meeting. Make sure that you're making it clear that this is a virtual meeting, right? So people aren't showing up at the pool or the clubhouse or wherever you normally have your meeting. Make sure that the notice has all the information that they need to dial into the meeting or to Zoom into the meeting. So they'll need the meeting, login information or a link. And, again, make it clear that owners are prohibited from attending the meeting in person. Okay, the most challenging part of having a video meeting or video conferencing meeting is how do we have members participate and still not hijack the meeting, right? And so the best way to do that is most systems like Zoom, they allow you to, prevent people from, participating in the meeting at inappropriate times. And so what you may want to do is have a homeowner form at the beginning and open it up and give everybody a minute to talk. You could ask members to submit their questions in advance. If you're using a Zoom format, like the format we're using today, you could have the questions all at the end, just like today. There's a lot of different ways that you can handle questions, but just remember that under Arizona law, before the board takes formal action on something, we are required to get input from the members. And so make sure that you're structuring your meetings that way so that if an owner does want to say something before the board takes action, that either the chat feature is enabled or you open up the floor if you don't have a lot of people in attendance, or you put it in the question and comment section and make sure that the board, acknowledges that, we've seen your question and we'll take that into consideration. Okay, let's do a quick poll. We're going to switch gears now and talk about secrets to effective collection of assessments. And so, one question that we have, just from a poll perspective, is, has the number of delinquent owners in your association increased since the pandemic started? Because our experience with our firm has been that we haven't seen a dramatic increase in owners not paying. And so, that's kind of an interesting question that we have. So let's see what our answers are. Okay, so very interesting. So 56% say no, 3% say yes, and 41% say I don't know. So that's something to keep an eye on over the next few, months as this pandemic continues to move on. Okay, let's just give you some quick tips on secrets to effective collection of delinquent assessments. And we have kind of our last 3 to 4 minutes to focus on this, and then we're going to go right into the questions. Okay, so what are some secrets that our firm has that we can share with you? Number one, you should have a collection policy, and you should be charging late fees in your association because there has to be a deterrent for owners who don't pay assessments. The second thing is you have to communicate with owners regarding the importance of paying their assessments on time and why it's important to pay assessments, because we have a budget, we count on everybody paying assessments, and so continuing to communicate with them, please pay your assessments on time, etc. The third tip is act in a timely manner. If you let people not pay for 4 years, it's going to be harder to get them paid, right? So what you want to do is act in a timely manner. If somebody doesn't pay a month or two of assessments, contact them, lien them, give their file to an attorney to pursue them. Because one thing I can tell you, after 20 plus years of practicing in this area, the faster you get the file to me, the more likely it is that I'm going to be able to collect the money for you. Another tip, really great tip, is number 4, you got to do your due diligence on the files, and you got to do a credit evaluation. So the first thing that our firm does when we get a file from a client is we do due diligence. We do a credit evaluation of the owner. We determine if they're underwater on their property. We determine if they have other debts that they owe, unpaid credit card bills. We determine if they filed bankruptcy. We check to see if they're working. We verify that they're still with that same job. We determine if they have vehicles. We just do like a 28-point test on them, and then we give you back that information. And the importance on that is that we're providing you with our roadmap to get the money, right? And so if you don't do your due diligence, you're just giving it to the attorney. The attorney is just sending out letters, right? Well, that's not going to get the money in always. You want to have a plan. So when we get a file, we do this due diligence. I go back to you. I say, listen, this person's credit's a train wreck. This may be where we want to go. Or, hey, this person has a job. They have really good credit. I don't understand why they're not paying. This is our suggested action. So we give you feedback and a game plan right when we get the file before we spend any money. And I think that's a really good job. I mean, a really good way to do this because, you don't really want to go through life without a roadmap, right? So when you have files and you have owners that are delinquent, we want to have a plan right from the get-go. This is how we're getting the money. And it's really a successful way to get the owners to pay quickly. And if somebody has really bad credit and they're a train wreck, we may say, hey, this person's like an inch away from getting foreclosed on and you're not going to get any money. You'd rather have us tell you that now. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about is, what are the different legal remedies? So this is kind of the final slide that I have today. What are the different legal remedies for collection of delinquent assessments? And so there's 2 main things that boards can do if an owner doesn't pay upfront. The first one is get a personal judgment against the owner, and that is just a piece of paper saying, this is how much Johnny Appleseed owes the association. And with that piece of paper, we have to go to justice court. We get a judgment against the owner. And with that piece of paper, we can garnish that owner's bank accounts. We can garnish their wages. We can garnish their rent if they're a landlord and they're renting their property out. So that's one option that we have. Another option is to foreclose on the owner, and that's a significantly more serious option. We can't even do that under the law until the owner owes either 1 year in assessments or $1,200 or more in assessments, whichever occurs first. But before we do the foreclosure, of course, we've already done our due diligence and the stuff that we talked about just a minute ago. And we don't foreclose on anybody unless they have adequate equity in their property. So, like I said, when you are doing your due diligence and credit evaluation on the front end, you already know which is going to be the best legal remedy to collect the money. So if they're employed, likely they're going to get a personal judgment. If they have a lot of equity in their property, and how do we know, again, from doing the credit evaluation, we're probably going to suggest to you that you do a foreclosure. Okay, great. I'm only 1 minute over, which is awesome.